Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, I'm going to go over the most puzzling players league wide as submitted by the Apples and Ginos Discord server. Let's get it. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. It's another day, another week 20. We are rapidly approaching the end of the fantasy hockey season. And hopefully you're in a good spot. Probably if you're still tuning in at this point, you're in a good spot. You're thinking about playoffs, you're thinking about gearing up to win a chip, and that's what we're here to try to help you do. The chat is popping already. Josh is in here. We've got DARPA Chief. Hey Nate, I'm in a 10-team Bangers Cats keeper league. Have Matt Tkachuk on my team. With him out for the season, I got offered J-Rob from a player who's not in playoff contention. Thoughts? Yeah, I'm a big fan of making moves that help you win championships. That's what we're here for at the end of the day. I don't want to play scared in keeper leagues. I want to go in and I want to try to win at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think this is actually a spot where Matt Tkachuk, even in a Bangers Cats, yeah, he has extra utility there. But I don't know that he's really outperforming J-Rob from a points perspective. So yeah, he's probably a little bit higher ranked in a Bangers Cats, but J-Rob, at a point per game pace now on the season, I think that that's a pretty good deal, and especially considering Dallas has a pretty solid playoff schedule upcoming as well. Steve says, curious to hear if you are worried about your fantasy playoffs with Kaprizov still out. I'm sure you're confident in your streaming, but any personal thoughts on it? Yeah, for those who don't know, Kirill Kaprizov on three of my four teams this year. I was aware when I made the pick. I almost didn't make the pick in the Patron League, which was my last of those three drafts where I did get Kaprizov. I was aware that I was potentially setting myself up for this scenario where a single injury to one player could actually really derail a lot of my fantasy season, but I did feel pretty strongly it was the best pick in all those places where I did get Kaprizov. And yeah, those are the breaks of fantasy hockey. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but so far it hasn't been too much of a problem. In first place in Kickupful, tier one. I'm just like 20 points behind Nimmer. Shout out Nimmer in terms of total fantasy points on the season. And the Fantasy Puck Content Creators League, I'm in second place with the most fantasy points for. I have Kaprizov there. And then in the Patron League, I think I'm fourth in the Patron League, which is Cats League. Um, and I have Kaprizov there, and it has been tough. That's the one where it's hit me the most, just because I don't have as much secondary scoring. Focused a little bit more on bangers categories, and losing Kaprizov scoring off the top has really hurt that team in particular. But yeah, like still making playoffs, still in bye position in two of the three spots. So I am feeling reasonably confident about that. I mean, there's no way about it. You lose your first round pick. That's it's not going to be helpful trying to win a championship. So yeah, I'm hopeful that Kaprizov comes back at some point, even if it's just for like week 24 or part of it or a single game somewhere. Obviously, I'm hoping for that, but either way, you have to play with the cards you're dealt, rather. So that's what I'm planning to do. Escapeful Dead is in here. Armin's in here. What up, fam? Got a major dilemma. Need your help with. All right, we can have at it. Party of the Moon Towers here. Agent Orange, Chinikov returning soon. Worth a pickup in a deep roster 12-team league. Was playing very well before his injury. I think it's an interesting spot. You might want to see where he slots in. There's a pretty good chance that he doesn't slot into the top six immediately. Would really doubt that he'd be on power play one. It feels like now the Blue Jackets have multiple players who are probably in line for power play one over Chinikov. You got Kent Johnson, obviously Boone Jenner back, Sean Monahan coming back at some point here in the not too distant future. So yeah, I think that Chinikov is probably, I would say definitely rosterable in a deep roster 12 team league, but I don't know if he's going to necessarily be better than the others out there. But yes, he was playing well before the injury for sure. Dynasty Dave, hashtag 0G. Good to see you. Josh Mayer, Allmark, been a sweat. Yeah, I have been rushing around trying to get kids to bed, but I did see that Washington was up 3-1 as of right now, 4 minutes left in the second. Yeah, that's not a great start. Well, it looks like Washington's been pumping shots though, so the save percentage isn't horrible. Josh also asked Strom or PLD. PLD is definitely hotter. Strom has a little bit better deployment, I would say. It's a tough question, to be quite honest with you. PLD does really seem to have found his own. Let's put PLD and Strom in the list. Let's compare them side by side over the last little bit here. Pierre-Luc Dubois and Dylan Strome. Can't have random capitalizations. They both have 5 points in their last five. It is Dubois who's getting more ice time. I'm honestly not sure if part of that could be due to penalty kill roll. No, I don't think either of them are penalty killing currently. Yeah, Dubois' underlying stats are not nearly as good. He's barely shooting. Although in this game today, he's got 5 shots randomly, so there is that. I think I would take Strome rest of season, but it does feel a bit coin flippy. I think that Dubois elevated himself enough in my eyes with this stretch of play to put him at least in the same tier. I think if you made me pick between the two, I'd still take Dylan Strome, but definitely a close thing. Mr. Kevin, hey Nate, last week I asked about Bichelle, was going to drop Letang, overdone for him, but Letang had a great week. Still Letang, Stars have a better playoff schedule for me too, I think. Yeah, I think I still would drop Chris Letang there. It's a solid week, definitely some better underlying stats for Letang here, but it is still Pittsburgh, and they could still unload even more players before the deadline here. Yeah, I just think that more likely you're going to feel better about that than dropping Vince Dunn, who I think is just the better player at this stage in both of their careers. So yeah, I think that's where I'm at with these two. But it's definitely a valid concern, a valid question to have. Josh asked Seider or Faber. Probably going most Seider there in most formats. Drewski's here. Let's go. Nason a safe drop in Cacuffle. Still need to activate Nichushkin or drop Stolars for games this week. I mean, Nason is going to hang on to top power play, especially if Hughes is missing any time here, right? Yeah, I think that's an interesting question for sure. I don't know that he's necessarily a safe drop. You could drop Stolars. Stolars is playing tonight, so it would have to be after that fact, I guess. But either way, it's a legitimate question between the two. I guess it might be worth evaluating what other potential goaltenders you could pick up if you had to. Nason definitely has fallen off. He was redlining for a good part of the season before. Underlying metrics are not great, but he is still getting good deployment in power play one. Yeah, I think you can drop Nason. I wouldn't tell you not to, but I think it's a real question between Stolars and him after Stolars' start tonight. Jordan says, hey Nate, do you prefer Talbot or Vejmelka rest of season in a 12-team points league? Yeah, at this point I'm taking Vejmelka. Talbot has run into a rough stretch of play. He had like a 4-game stretch where he was absolutely unbelievable, and now he's had like a 4-game stretch where he's pretty ordinary, tending towards bad actually. And so yeah, I'll take Vejmelka at the moment. PB Stars, good day, Nate. I'm sure you saw the news about Verhaeghe on Power Play 2. Just curious if you think that may last through the next couple weeks. I'm in playoffs right now. No, I don't think it will last yeah, they are continually trying stuff, it feels like, in Florida, but yeah, Verhege is a much better player than anybody else they have there. So yeah, I'm going with Verhege. I think it'll be back sooner rather than later. That being said, you're in playoffs. It's do or die time. If you can't, if you are feeling strapped and you have to make a move, then yeah, there might be a situation I can see in which you do make that move. And I wouldn't hold that against you for sure if you have to drop for Hagee for some reason because you got to have somebody who's getting that deployment right now. That's a legitimate thing to have happen in the playoffs, and I wouldn't hate on that move if you really do need it. But baseline expectation, Rahegi gets back up there sooner rather than later. Agent Orange says, love the sweater. Thanks. Yeah, rocking the Toronto Scepters once again. Future Gadget Lab, Future Leaf M. Ferraro versus Future Waiver Wire Fodder Philippe Myers just now. Yeah. I have the game, the Leafs versus San Jose Sharks game here on my phone beside, but Leafs are on the power play now. But it does look like a bit of a clinic right now on this Leafs power play, but they haven't been able to beat Georgiev. You'd think that they should be able to beat Georgiev here, right? But yeah, nothing so far, that's for sure. They got Robertson out here. I'd like to see that. I'm sure he just came in for whoever it was that came off, but either way, good to see. Joseph Hall, hey Nate, thoughts on hold or drop Drouin in a 12-team Bangers Cats League? Goals, assists, power play points, shots, hits, plus minus. It's an interesting one. Yeah, with the rival or re-arrival, I guess, of Valery Nichushkin, I'm not really sure if that's like a net win or a net loss for Drouin. He's maintained a role on top power play, but he has been second line for a while as they've gone with McKinnon, Natchez, and Lehkonen on the top line. Nichushkin, theoretically, as long as he's on the second line with Drouin, actually makes Drouin better at even strength by giving him another really good teammate to play with, but I don't know how long we can really anticipate any of this lasting, and there's always the looming specter of what if it's Nichushkin and Lehkonen joining McKinnon and Natchez on power play one, and Drouin's the one who gets kicked off. That's always a problem. I will say this: I don't think you have to hold on to Drouin. But I don't know that it's much worse than it was like a week ago at this exact moment, but I would be keeping a very close eye on it. Sebastian, would you rather get Trocheck or J-Rob for the rest of the season? Points are similar to Kakuffel. That's going to be J-Rob for me with a bullet. Schedule is better for sure. Party at the Moon Tower says Sasha. Sasha, is that a Barkov reference? I'm not keeping up with the games that are ongoing. Is that yeah, Barkov? That's good stuff. I've got Barkov in a spot as well. BB Stars unrelated, but Blake is always gassing up your flow. You should take the cap off and show it off sometime. Giggity. It's really not that impressive, to be quite honest with you. I'm not really sure why he thinks that he needs to gas that up. It's really nothing to write home about. I just got a cut about a week ago, so it's a lot shorter than it usually is too. I usually go through stages where I get a haircut and I get it cut pretty short and then I let it grow for way too long and it just starts to look super raggedy. That's probably one of the times when Blake has mentioned the flow when it's just like getting way too long. But yeah, that's about how I do it. Barkov just powered by Point, Cooch, Hedman, and beat Vasi. What a horse. He will do that. Mr. Kevin, hard to tell, obviously, but do you think the Sharks will run Askarov down the stretch? Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance, right? The Sharks don't have a lot to play for this year. It would make sense if they want to get Askarov into the NHL and get him to face more NHL caliber shooters, that this would be the time to do it. I'm not sure, actually. It's worth wondering, at least, or trying to investigate here. The San Jose Barracuda, where Askarov is playing down there, are they in any kind of playoff situation? Because that might be a situation. Sometimes these teams will value, the potential of just like a Calder Cup run for any of their players, goaltenders or forwards or defensemen, whatever. They may say, actually, we think it's better for your development just to get into a playoff run in the AHL. And sometimes they'll do that for sure. So that could be a case in this particular instance. I'm not sure. Right now, the San Jose Barracuda are 8th in the Western Conference. So they have a good chance. They're 28-20. Yeah, it could be a spot where they just decide to leave him down there for that Calder Cup run and try to get him into some playoff games down in the A. So that is an option as well, but it also makes sense to me that they would give Askarov some run down the stretch here in the NHL as well, if that's what they decide is best for his development. Joseph says, thanks for the analysis. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Party at the Moon Tower talking about the Barkov goal. The Rush was offered Jack Hughes and Tage Thompson for JT Miller, playoff bound, but don't believe my team is good enough to win. Should I accept the risky trade? Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a decent trade. Tage Thompson has more games played, especially if your playoffs are 22 through 24. That definitely should work out better in your favor. I believe the Rangers are, I'm going to look it up here so I don't perjure myself, but I believe the Rangers are, here it is, 8 games, 2 off nights in weeks 22 through 24, whereas Buffalo's 11 games and 4 off nights. So you're getting a significant schedule boost weeks 22 through 24 from getting Tage Thompson, even if you don't get anything out of Jack Hughes, like if he's done for the year. Tage Thompson probably comparable to JT Miller, just given the extra 3 games, right? Even if JT Miller has a great week, Tage Thompson could easily equal him. It's risky for sure, but I think the upside is there. I think I'm into that. CG, is Jones power play 1 in New York? Yeah, so they did try him out there. I actually haven't seen. That's worth checking out. Worth investigating. I didn't see any tweets about lines today. That doesn't mean they don't exist out there in the Twitter universe. So let's see what we can find, shall we? New York Rangers tweets. No, nothing from today. But yeah, yesterday, game yesterday, right? Yeah, game yesterday. They have played actually. They have had a power play already, and yeah, Zach Jones was on the top power play. Zibanejad, JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, Artemi Panarin, and Zach Jones on the back end. So yeah, Zach Jones, that means he's plenty rosterable in most formats, right? As long as he's going to get some opportunity to run a top power play, and a top power play as good as the New York Rangers, definitely worth checking out. He played 22 minutes against Nashville yesterday. Yeah, definitely worth checking out at the moment. They might just be like highlighting him for a potential trade. That's definitely possible. But even if it's for a week, you might be able to do worse than a Zach Jones stream for this week. Armin, drop 1 for week 22 playoffs to add Vlasic, Matt Roy, Mikey Anderson, or Barzal. Standard cats with hits, blocks, plus minus. I have an injured Jack Hughes and Matthew Tkachuk. Honestly, I feel pretty confident that Tkachuk is completely done. The Seth Jones trade, I don't think makes sense for the Panthers unless they are completely assuming that Tkachuk will not be back unless it's the playoffs. So if you're dropping somebody there, I think it would be Matthew Tkachuk first. Yeah, that's the way I would go about it, to be honest with you. It would be shocking to me, like less than 1% possibility that Tkachuk somehow comes back before the end of the season. So if that's an option, I would drop Tkachuk there. If you do have to choose between these 3, drop 1 for week 22 playoffs to add Vlasic, probably Mikey Anderson. Yeah, I would hold out hope for Barzal and drop Mikey Anderson, I think. CG, better D-man this week. Burns, Lowry, Faber, or Vlasic. I think Lowry has the most potential, but Vlasic has a better playoff schedule. So if that's entering into it, then maybe you look at Vlasic. If it's just for this week, I go Lowry. Duresh, thanks, Nate. That is my playoff schedule. Good stuff. Jones has a point already. Says thanks. Verhaeghe, Meyer, or Rust rest of season. 12 team points, playoffs 23 through 25. That is tough. I think it's Rust at the moment. It just feels the most secure. The playoff schedules are not that different between these three teams. Yeah, I think it's Rust at the moment. Verhaeghe, I think, has more potential. Meyer also has more potential, but Rust is the most reliable, I think, at the moment. Weekly locks, yeah. Steve Larini with Hughes out could be Timo time. Somebody has to score, hopefully. Yeah, I'm very interested to see what they do if Hughes is out long term. If they do decide to put Meyer, I was talking with Blake about it. There could be a scenario in which Meyer is actually best uh, the best guy to replace what Jack Hughes brings to the top power play. Obviously, no one is replacing what Jack Hughes brings to a power play, but if you're going to try to patch it up as best you can definitely make the argument that Timo Meyer is the best for that. But Sheldon Keefe has hated Timo Meyer all season long, so wouldn't be shocking if he doesn't even get a sniff. Mr. Kevin Keefe's going to put Palat on power play 1. Watch LMAO. Yeah, pretty good chance. Pretty good chance. All right. We've got through the comments for now. Keep them coming. I'll get back to them, but we got to get into the list. 21 minutes into this. Larry Nichushkin was the top requested player in the Apples and Geos Discord server this week. He's only played 2 games here with 1 goal since returning. Just over 18 minutes average time on ice. 3rd in shots per 60. 7th individual scoring chances 4 per 60. Really good stuff. Getting lots of looks, lots of love from Coach Jared Bednar. Not playing with McKinnon at even strength, but did get a look on the top power play unit. They did split it. I didn't actually see which was the one later in the game, which you might think is the better indication of what they might go with moving forward. Yeah, I think either way, Nichushkin is a player that I want to be hanging on to because the potential is really high there. We've seen Nichushkin go on stretches and long stretches where he's been above a point per game. Those players don't grow on trees. And even in a line 2 power play 2 role, I do think Nichushkin can be borderline fantasy relevant in 12-team leagues. Probably not in 10-team leagues, but 12-team leagues, your standard 12-team leagues, I think he is. And the kind of super high potential, if he does get on a line 1 power play 1 situation at any point, really keeps me coming back for more there. So I'm liking Nichushkin rest of the season at the moment. Philip Forsberg has just 1 goal in his last 5 here, just over 19.5 minutes average time on ice, 57th shots per 60, 5th in shot attempts per 60, 32nd individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 13th Corsi 4 per 60, 23rd in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. It really feels like Philip Forsberg has done his darndest to try to put this team on his back all year long. His individual metrics are terrific. His team metrics are not so great, and he's had some pretty bad shooting luck, it looks like, this season. Rest of the season, I still think Forsberg should be a point per game player, 35-ish goal pace. I think he's good enough to do that, even if the rest of the team just absolutely crumbles around him. Obviously, losing Roman Josi does hurt. That there's no two ways about that. That's a big engine on the back end that you can't really afford to lose. No team could. So that is going to hurt Forsberg to some extent, but Forsberg is plenty able to drive play on his own, and he does it on a consistent basis and really has all year long, even if the results haven't been there. So I have no concerns about Philip Forsberg. If he does continue to not perform for fantasy, it'll be bad luck rather than a lack of his ability, I will say. Noah Dobson, 2 games played since returning from his injury, just under 22 minutes average time on ice. And it's kind of a split power play situation right now for the Isles. You got Palmieri and Nelson on one. You got Lee and Horvat on another. You got Dobson and Boqvist on one, and Pulak and D'Angelo on another. It's a rough spot, but I still think, if he's going to get 22 minutes a night, I think Dobson is a very talented player. I think that the Islanders, sans Barzal, are a very different team in terms of dangerousness, and there's every chance that Brock Nelson gets moved this week. That would be another hit to their roster. So I do think the ceiling is lower for Noah Dobson than it has been at any point prior in this season when he has been healthy previously. That being said, I still think Dobson is at least a 50-point player in the current iteration of the Islanders as a point pace rest of season. So I'm still happy to roster Noah Dobson, but definitely the shine has worn off a little bit just given the current state of the Islanders. Mason Lowry here, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in his last five, just over 23 minutes, average time on ice. I went over Mason Lowry with Blake in the flagship show, so definitely go back and check that out if you haven't already. I'm very interested in what Lowry's been doing as of late. It really feels like he was given a new role and he just absolutely took the bull by the horns here, stepped up with all of his individual metrics. Feels a little bit like a chameleon, like he just completely changes his game to do whatever's being asked of him in the moment. And he's perfectly comfortable to just suddenly become a massive shot producing defenseman. I don't know if that will continue. Obviously, we're dealing with a very small sample size, but the early returns are phenomenal. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Pavel Dorofiev, 2 goals, no assists in his last five, just over 60 and a half minutes average time on ice. 38th in shots per 60, 22nd individual scoring chances for per 60, 32nd in on ice Corsi for per 60, and 59th in on ice scoring chances for per 60. Last game he was playing with Brandon Saad, Thomas Hurdle, and also still on power play 1. I really like Dorofiev. I've said this a lot this year. On the season, 7th in shots per 60, 15th in individual scoring chances for per 60. I think this guy is a hell of a player. 33 goal pace on the season, and I think he could do even better than that if given more minutes. So I think there's a real player here, and I'm happy to roster him. I don't think you're going to do much better than Pavel Dorofiev off your waiver wire in 12-team leagues. Matt Boldy, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last five, over 21 minutes average time on ice. Really getting the star treatment here in Minnesota. 18th in shots per 60, 67th individual scoring chances for per 60, 93rd Corsi for per 60, 51st in on ice scoring chances for per 60, 28 goal, 70-point pace from Boldy on the season. And he has undoubtedly run pretty cold to get to this point. Yeah, you have to wonder what this season looks like if Kaprizov stays healthy all year long. Feel like it could add at least 10 points to Boldy's totals. 9.8 shooting percentage on the season is unbelievably low for a player of Matt Boldy's talents. Yeah, it really feels like Matt Boldy has been unfairly snake bitten throughout much of this year. The problem is that Minnesota doesn't have a lot of talent up front. Obviously, the addition of Gus Nyquist should help. He was immediately put on Boldy's line with Marco Rossi in the last game. And so I'm hopeful that that's a kind of band-aid, but obviously to reach Boldy's full potential, you want Kaprizov back in the fold, and we're not sure if or when we will get that for fantasy this year. Dmitry Voronkov, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in his last five, just under 18 minutes average time on ice. Individual metrics have fallen off as of late. 283rd shots per 60, 216th individual scoring chances for per 60, 198 in on ice Corsi for per 60, and 207 in on ice scoring chances for per 60. It's a tough look for Dmitry Voronkov in the underlying metrics, but as long as he's maintaining a line one, power play one role here, I am not going to be too mad about what's going on for Dmitry Voronkov. I think he was probably due some regression in a lot of ways, but he continues to capture points. 32 goals, 64-point pace on the season. Doesn't feel that far off from what he should be able to do moving forward, if I'm being completely honest. Seth Jones had 1 goal in 4 games prior to this move, where he gets moved to the Florida Panthers. Blake and I, again, talked about Seth Jones in this move in pretty great detail. We were both kind of the opinion that sooner rather than later, Seth Jones should get a look on the top power play. That was not the way that they practiced, but I do think that Aaron Ekblad has always been a bit more of a stopgap option on the top power play than a, answer to the problem there. I think Seth Jones has a much greater chance of being that guy for the Panthers, and it's not hard to imagine that that might be a part of the reason that the Panthers acquired him. They also might have thought about this and said, you know what, we really don't need to bring Seth Jones over here and throw him right into top power play with guys he's never practiced with. Let's let him, play some even strength minutes, get comfortable in a new system before we throw everything in the kitchen sink at him. But I do expect that Seth Jones will get a chance to run the top power play, and I do expect he'll be better than Aaron Ekblad at it for the rest of the season. All right, let's go back to the comments here. Drewski, Nate, Risto, and or Kuzmenko, I believe you're trying to say there, worth a pickup this week in Cupful. I don't mind Ristolainen for this week. Does feel like the Flyers are probably just kind of like throwing him out there on the top power play, trying to get somebody to bite on him at the trade deadline right now. But either way, we can take the production for fantasy, and Ristolainen has actually been pretty good. Puts up pretty good peripherals. If he runs into the odd power play assist here and there, that just adds a little bit more to his profile, and I don't hate it, especially in deeper leagues like the Cacuffle. So that's a good one there. Warlike Fury finally made it live. Congratulations and welcome. PB Stars lost Yossi to injury and picked up Lowry. Feels good. Yeah, that's a good consolation prize. I did the same actually in one league where I have Yossi. Mr. Kevin, depends on Vegas roster, but Dorofiev has my eye for the draft next year. Absolutely. Armin, for my question, would you rather Mikey Anderson or Matt Roy for week 22? I think I'll take Matt Roy, but it is pretty coin flippy between the two. Michael asking if we covered Brock Faber. No, I haven't. We did cover Brock Faber on the flagship show, so you can go back and check that one out. But yeah, basically Cole's Notes version, Brock Faber, as long as he's on power play 1, is going to be of interest to me. That playoff schedule rather coming up for Minnesota is really enticing as well. And so as long as Faber's on power play 1, I'm content to roster him, especially if I am not too worried about making the playoffs. If you're in a comfortable spot for the playoffs, then yeah, I feel you can feel pretty comfortable in rostering Brock Faber as long as he maintains power play 1. And if he's on power play 1 come playoff time, then you're feeling pretty good about even the schedule. Even if the results aren't amazing, you should still feel pretty good about the schedule and the fact that you're getting a lot of off-night stuff from this guy. CG asks, is second half Palmieri a thing? I don't know, but I picked him up in Cacuffle, and I've been pretty happy with that. So there is that. Armin, 4 games of Anderson, greater sign, 3 games of Roy. Potentially. The problem is that LA doesn't score a lot, and Anderson is not a scoring player. Roy has at least shown some propensity to do that in the past. It's never really come to fruition, but yeah, that was part of the calculus where I was still leaning Roy, but yeah, I wouldn't quibble too much if you decided to go Anderson either. I think it's a valid conversation. All right, back to the list we go. Filipino, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points in his last 5 games, just over 17.5 minutes average time on ice, 26 shots per 60, 25th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 58th in Corsi, 4 per 60, and 84th in on-ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Obviously getting a good look here on Vancouver amidst all of the concern and speculation about Elias Pettersson. You have Filip Chytil, who's just kind of getting to business when he's out there. They're on opposite power play units, which does kind of hurt, but both power play units have Quinn Hughes, which is probably all you really care about at the end of it all. Either way, I am interested in Chytil. These underlying metrics are pretty super over the last little bit. I think Chytil has 60, 65, 70 best case point potential rest of season. So if you need that kind of point pace in your life, I think Chytil can definitely do that for you. Adam Fantilli, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in his last 5 games, 19.5 minutes average time on ice, 144th shots per 60, 43rd individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 187 Corsi, 4 per 60, 177 in on-ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Yeah, I think obviously Marchenko was not on for all of this, but him coming back should improve the on-ice numbers. But it doesn't matter if Fantilli is doing the thing on his own regardless, and I love to see it. big time target for me this offseason. I thought that this could be the season where he really broke out, and it really does seem like he's doing that in the second half this year. It took the Monahan injury for it to really open up for him, but he's taken the bull by the horns here, and it doesn't feel like he's going to give it back anytime soon. At this point, I would say I feel it's 60% likely that Fantilli hangs on to top line usage when Monahan comes back. That's pretty much a total guess, but that's where I'm at the moment. Boone Jenner, Blake and I did talk about Boone Jenner as well in the flagship show. Basically, it's line two, power play two for Boone Jenner. Obviously, 7 points in the last 4 games since returning from injury is really great. Love to see it, but yeah, I don't think it's going to continue. 40-ish point pace makes sense for Boone Jenner. If he gets on the top power play, sure, that's a different scenario immediately that we're talking about then. But until we see that, I don't think you can be too excited about Boone Jenner. If you are in Bangers Cats, definitely he has some added utility there. Jack Hughes has 3 goals and 5 points in his last 5, but now we have this injury to deal with. So obviously that's something that you're going to have to keep very close tabs on if you want to have any sort of confidence in what to do with Jack Hughes or what to do with the players around him. As I mentioned, I think it's possible that Timo Meier is the best power play one replacement. I also think it's possible that Sheldon Keefe just hates Timo Meier enough that it doesn't even matter. So yeah, all of these are in play for me. All of these scenarios, really, really good chance that it's just status quo. Like they put Palat out there and it's just a mess. That would be worst case scenario for everybody on that power play, to be quite honest. But yeah, hopefully Jack Hughes, it's not nearly as severe as we as we all think it is after seeing it. But yeah, it did not look good, that's for sure. So we're still kind of in wait and see mode. But yeah, hopefully Jack Hughes can be back sooner rather than later. Alex Laferriere, just 1 goal in his last 5, no points in his last 4, famously, as I took him in the head-to-head streamer deathmatch. He went instantly cold. 252nd shots per 60, 139 individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. And yeah, the Kings have pretty much just given up on Laferriere, demoted him down to the third line. I will say that third line, it still has Anze Kopitar on it, but they really have started to lean more on the Danault line and the Byfield lines now. And that's obviously interesting. Laferriere was still on the top power play in the last game, so that's still a spot where you can feel like he should be able to get some production. It just hasn't been there. I think Laferriere is probably just a kind of a hot and cold guy. And so, yeah, the season-long stats look really good. The 23 goal, 47 point pace feels roughly accurate to what he's put on the stat sheet so far, but it does feel like a guy who's may just go ice cold and may get super hot from one game to the next or 1 week to the next. So it might just be a case, the Niederreiter kind of scenario where you just have to jump on the guy when he's hot and jump right back off as soon as he gets a little bit cold. Alex Vlasic here, 3 assists in his last 5 games, over 22 minutes average time on ice. Got the top power play with Seth Jones being moved out of town, which was expected, but good to see. Yeah, there's some speculation, I guess, that they could call up Kevin Korchinski, who is an offensively minded defenseman who they have had up in Chicago in the past, and we're giving some minutes to on power play at one point. But Vlasic has produced there this year. That's good to see. And yeah, it's a player that should definitely be rostered in basically all formats at this point in time. As long as he's on that power play one, you would expect that he'll have a decent chance to put together some point totals rest of season. It is still Chicago, so yeah, you're going to take that with a grain of salt in terms of the ceiling, but the floor should actually be quite solid if he's getting power play one. Owen Tippett has 4 goals, 5 points in his last 4 games, just over 14 minutes average time on ice, 5th in shots per 60, 47th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 46th in on ice Corsi 4 per 60, and fifth in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. Yeah, Tippett is hot at the moment. It's still a John Tortorella situation there. Tippett was playing with Couturier and Mishkov. Mishkov is hot as well. Um, yeah, as long as those two guys are playing together, then you would think that they should be able to do something together, two offensively skilled players. But this 14 minutes a night, like nobody is going to produce really big numbers playing that small of minutes every night. So I can't get too excited about Tippett even with 4 goals in 4 games. Brian Rust, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last four, over 20 minutes a night, 216 shots per 60, 154 individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 89th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 183 in on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. When healthy, Brian Rust has scored at a 33 goal, 73 point pace, which is about in line with where I had him projected at the start of the season. It's just the injuries that continue to catch up with Brian Rust throughout the course of the season here. Yeah, I think it's a player that you're happy to have on your team as long as he's healthy. I can't imagine that you're dropping Brian Rust when he's producing at a 73 point pace, 4 points in his last four. I can't imagine you're dropping Brian Rust. I don't know who you'd be dropping him for, even in a 10-team league, probably. I don't think there's much better than Brian Rust available to you in most cases. So Brian Rust is a mainstay in your lineup if you've got him. That's about how I see it at the moment. Last one on the list here, Mike Matheson, 2 assists in his last five, over 25 minutes average time on ice, 68th shots per 60 amongst all defensemen, 85th individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 125 Corsi 4 per 60, 107 in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. Now, the Canadians have scored a bunch of goals on Buffalo so far tonight. Is there any love for Mike Matheson? He did factor in on a shorthanded goal for Nick Suzuki. So there you have it. Good stuff for Mike Matheson, I guess. Yeah, basically the question in the Discord server was more to do with should you hold Mike Matheson just because the playoff schedule for Montreal is pretty good. 11 games played in weeks 22 through 24, 3 off nights. So it's a pretty good playoff schedule in terms of total games played for Montreal. Yeah, in a 12-team league, he's right on the borderline. Like, if you look at the season-long stats for Mike Matheson, 6 goal, 37-point pace on the season, and that's with a 36% IPP, 3.7% shooting percentage. Those feel low. The 11.5% on-ice shooting percentage might be a touch high without power play one usage for much of the year, but the IPP is super low. So yeah, I feel like he's kind of a 40-point defenseman, 40 to 45-point defenseman. Without power play one, if there was a Lane Hudson injury or something like that and he was back on the top power play, then he would have obviously a much higher ceiling for fantasy production. I have Mike Matheson in Cacuffull. That's a 16-team league, and so there's definitely nothing better than Mike Matheson to pick up out on the wire in that case, so I'm hanging on to Matheson in that case. That's a little bit simpler of a decision there. In 14-team and 12-team and 10-team, I don't think you need to hang on to Matheson. In 12-team, I'm trying to hang on to Matheson. In 14-team, I would hang on to Matheson in a more conventional point setup at least. All right. We only have one more comment, and then I think we'll be done. Wow, we cruised through this one here today. If you got any more comments, get them in quick, but if not, then we'll close it out with Steve's question here. Are there any players under 50% you're watch listing for NHL trade deadline week who you'd add from your free agency if a player ends up on a new team? Example, Dylan Cousins, John Gibson, etc. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't typically try to predict or overreact to trade lists or whatever comes out from all the media outlets at this time of year. That being said, more often I feel like it's not the player who gets traded to the new team that pops off in a big way, unless it's like a super big name, like a Rantanen you might think should be able to pop off on a new team. Hasn't quite worked out that way in Carolina, but that's obviously a different caliber of player. But in a lot of cases, you have kind of the reverse effect, right? Coming from a worse team where they're getting first line minutes, first power play minutes in a lot of cases, and they go to a much better team, and all of a sudden now they're not on the first line anymore. They're not on the top power play anymore. In a lot of cases, you'll see stuff like that. And so it actually reduces the value for fantasy of the player getting moved. More often, I feel like you get the kind of the reverse situation where a player gets moved off of a bad team and it opens up a spot for another player to jump up to play line 1 minutes, to play power play 1 minutes. An example that I can think of in Buffalo, they're talking about moving guys like Zucker. JJ Paterka has come up. Dylan Cousins, as you mentioned, has come up. If a lot of players got moved there, Alex Tuck has come up as well. If a lot of players got moved there, you could see a scenario in which a guy like Yuri Kulik could end up being line 1 power play 1 in Buffalo for the rest of the season, playing alongside Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin. And that would be a really good scenario for Yuri Kulik specifically. So more often, I think you actually kind of get the reverse situation where it's not the kind of headline player getting moved that has the big uptick for fantasy or the big value increase for fantasy, but it's more the players that are left behind on the selling teams that kind of move up the lineup and get additional deployment, additional power play usage, additional time on ice that end up being kind of the big winners for fantasy. And so you will see stuff like that a fair bit. So yeah, I think that's worth highlighting. I am kind of just scrolling through here to see if there are any names that are out there. Paterka is a player that I can't imagine why Buffalo would want to move JJ Paterka, but if he were to get moved and he did end up in a spot where they did want to use him line 1 power play 1, I'd have to think about where that could actually be, where that would actually make sense. But that could be a spot where a guy like Paterka could just pop off in a new spot. I could see that being a nice fit. I'm trying to think if there's really anybody else that I think will pop off in a new spot. Any of the guys who have been, noted to be in the conversation for potential to be moved. Not a lot that I'm thinking of right here. I do think it's more likely that we see, like I mentioned, the reverse scenario where a player gets moved and another player moves up the lineup because of it and starts to produce better as a result. All right, going back to the comments, Frank says, picked up Ristolainen, slim deep pickings, currently on power play 1. I think that's a fine play. Clixie, would you keep Besser for Vancouver's playoff schedule / trade? I've been eyeing up Dubois or Kane. Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that Besser does get moved. It sounds like the extension talks have not really gone anywhere. The thing is that Vancouver's still in a playoff spot. So they're still trying to do that. So they would have to get somebody really substantial for Brock Besser for that to make sense for them. And I don't really know who that is. So it could be a spot where they just kind of end up hanging on to Besser, even though it's not optimal from a team building perspective, just because they are still in a playoff spot and they still want to get to the dance. Yeah, I feel very like 50-50 whether Besser gets moved this week here. So it's very much up in the air for me at the moment. It's worth it. Honestly, I think Dubois is in the same tier as Besser currently. I think Patrick Kane has a worse playoff schedule, but I would trust Patrick Kane more than I would trust Brock Besser in the games that he does play. But with the playoff schedule, probably pretty equivalent in terms of expectation for scoring in that time period. So, yeah, definitely the right question that you're asking here, and it'll really depend on what Vancouver decides to do with Besser. Michael asks, hey Nate, how are you doing in the Content Creators League? Who's been your best player in that league? Yeah, so in the Content Creators League, I am first in points for, second in the actual standings. I'm just trying to pull it up here. Yeah, first in points for, second in the actual standings. I've got my playoff spot locked up, but still have to lock up the bye here with a couple more weeks. So hopefully I can do that. Yeah, it's gone pretty well, pretty similar to last year. Um, so yeah, hopefully I can bring home the championship there again. Gomer Jackson, Spencer Knight looks okay so far as first period tonight. Also, Creamer rules, just saying. uh, yeah, that's good info. I'm very curious to see what it looks like. Spencer Knight in the Chicago uniform. Yeah, it's a really weird spot to go from a really good team to a really bad team and be instantly like their goalie, the guy that they're going to make potentially one of the faces of the franchise for the rest of like for the next 10 years. That's a really huge like mental shift for a player, let alone a goaltender. But I think that Spencer Knight, like he's been touted as a guy with the potential to do exactly that. And now we get to see it. So I really do hope that it works out for him and he provides a boost to the Chicago Blackhawks. Duresh, has Mishkov been covered today? If not, how does he look? Mishkov looks fantastic. We covered him on the flagship show, but I'll throw it up here so you can have another look here. Over the last 5 games here, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. Fourth in shots per 60. Mishkov, the individual player, is absolute dynamite. The real question is Tortorella going to bench him at any point again? And your best money is on, yeah, probably at some point yet again. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. But I do think there's a pretty good chance that Mishkov does get demoted one more time before the end of the season, at least. Toronto scored Tavares on the power play from Marner and Matthews, looks like. Good stuff there. Blister Boy, hi Nate. Any thoughts on Ekblad? Was dropped in 12-team Bangers Cats League. My droppable Ds are Letang and Romanov. Should I drop either for Ekblad? Also thoughts on Batherson, a drop. Um, so Ekblad's still on power play 1 at the moment, so that's probably a reason to hang on to him at the moment. Uh, yeah, I think that's a good player to hang on to. But yeah, better. I think I'd rather have Ekblad than Letang at the moment. Um, it's close because I do expect that Seth Jones will get that power play 1 spot instead of Ekblad at some point here. I just don't know exactly how fast that happens. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if I'd make that move, to be honest. Bangers Cats is gives you more weight towards Letang, right? Um, yeah, I might just hold there. I don't know that Ekblad's gonna like change your season in that way. You know what I mean? So I think I might hold there. Michael Rowland, do you know if Yahoo automatically sets bye weeks or does the league commissioner have to implement it? Um, yeah, so if you're in a custom league, you would have to set it, but it is the default. So if you don't change anything, if you create a custom league and you don't change anything, I do believe you would have bye weeks as a default. Justin, thoughts on Bennett with the Kachuk injury? Yeah, I've covered this in a previous pod, but definitely worth going over. I think that realistically, it's a hit to Bennett at even strength, but he probably ends up with a few more minutes in power play 1 because of it. So, in all actuality, it's probably a bit of a wash, best guess. Um, yeah, but if he does come off power play 1, then that's a tough situation for him. I think my best guess is that I'm not changing a whole lot on my evaluation of Bennett as long as he's getting power play 1 as a result of the Kachuk injury. Gomer Jackson says, thanks, Nate. Great work, by the way. Appreciate you. Jordan asks, would you take Vimelka over Saros rest of season in a points league? That's a great question. Vimelka or Saros rest of season in a points league? Um, Nashville has a good playoff schedule, and Saros will get the volume, but I think I would take Vimelka at the moment. Yeah. Yep, I think I'd take Vimelka at the moment. Part of that is just how I view goaltenders, and if Vimelka goes takes a turn for the worse yet again, then I wouldn't feel bad about dropping him the same way I wouldn't feel bad about dropping Saros. So that's where I'm at. Vejmelka over Saros in the year of our Lord 2025. Who would have thought? That feels like a pretty good place to call this one. So that's going to be all that I got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band. They're there for supplying music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. And that's it, folks. Much love.